Few phrases in the debate more quickly than Israel has a right to exist. See, this functions as a rhetorical shield, foreclosing scrutiny of Israeli policy, history, or theology. But what does that phrase actually mean? Does it mean Israel's actions are immune from moral or legal evaluation? That its conduct cannot be weighed against international law or the standards applied to any other state? That criticism itself is illegitimate? If the right to exist implies exemption from scrutiny, then it is not a right in the ordinary political sense. It becomes rather a blank check. See, the claim here is much more narrow. The modern state of Israel does not possess a metaphysical, biblical, or legally unique right to exist that places it beyond criticism. States are political entities, after all. Their legitimacy derives from law, conduct, and consent, not from theological innovation or ancient ancestry alone. Supporters often cite the 1922 British Mandate for Palestine as Israel's legal foundation. The mandate incorporated in the 1917 Balfour Declaration, which promised a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. It did not promise a sovereign state. The distinction matters. The mandate also required that nothing, and I quote, shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, end quote. See, those communities were overwhelmingly Arab Palestinians at the time. If the mandate's language is sufficient to justify Jewish statehood, then by identical reasoning, it also justifies Palestinian national rights. One cannot treat half the document as sacred and the other half as incidental. More broadly, the 20th century repeatedly demonstrated that borders drawn by external powers without regard for local populations produce instability. From the Sykes-Picot arrangement in the Middle East to post-World War I European settlements, imposed solutions often generated decades of conflict. Israel's history of continuous regional war since 1948 reflects this pattern. When the British Mandate expired on May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared the State of Israel. The United States recognized it within minutes. No multilateral sovereignty transfer ever occurred. It was a unilateral declaration followed by rapid diplomatic recognition. Prior to independence, Jewish paramilitary groups such as Irgun and Lehi conducted organized insurgency campaigns against British authorities and Arab civilians. The 1946 King David Hotel bombing killed 91 people. The 1948 Deir Yassin massacre contributed to widespread Palestinian flight. These events are part of the historical record. The point is not to single out Israel uniquely. Many states, after all, were born amid violence. The question is whether unilateral declaration and armed struggle automatically create an irrevocable moral right to exist, particularly when similar standards are not universally applied elsewhere. Another argument asserts Jewish ancestral connection to the land of Canaan as a basis for sovereignty. But if ancient ethnic connection establishes modern political entitlement, then the principle destabilizes borders worldwide. Indigenous claims in the Americas, for example, involve documented dispossession within the last few centuries, far more recent than a 2,000-year diaspora. Few proponents of Israeli ancestral sovereignty advocate consistent application of the principle globally. See, even if genealogical continuity were conclusively established, political sovereignty typically rests on present realities, continuous habitation, legal frameworks, and mutual recognition. Palestinian Arabs, including Palestinian Christians whose communities predate Islam, can document centuries of continuous presence in the land. Ancestry alone, therefore, does not function as a universally accepted basis for modern state legitimacy. Among American evangelicals, support for Israel is often rooted in dispensationalism, a 19th century theological framework associated with John Nelson Darby and popularized through the Scofield Reference Bible. This system interprets Old Testament land promises as applying to a future ethnic national Israel. Historically, however, the dominant Christian tradition, including Catholic, Orthodox, and Reformed Protestants, interpreted the Abrahamic promises covenantally and Christologically. In Galatians 3, the Apostle Paul writes that those who belong to Christ are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. This reading universalizes the inheritance through faith rather than ethnic descent. In covenant theology, Old Testament land promises are typological. That is, they are fulfilled in Christ and ultimately in the new creation, not in a modern nation state. Therefore, the claim that American Christians are theologically obligated to support the modern state of Israel as a covenantal imperative is historically contested and not representative of most of church history. The moral urgency behind Zionism was Jewish safety after centuries of European persecution. A sovereign homeland was presented as a necessary refuge. Yet Israel has experienced repeated wars: 1948, 1956, 1967, 1973, 1982, 2006, and multiple Gaza conflicts. Persistent regional hostility and ongoing security crises. The October 7th, 2023 attack was the deadliest single day for Jews since the founding of Israel in 1948. Meanwhile, Jewish communities in countries such as the United States and Canada live without comparable military threats. Anti-Semitism exists, and it must be opposed as far as it is valid. But the absolute safety through sovereignty argument is a promise that is not materialized in any way envisioned. Historically, early Zionists considered alternative territories, including proposals in East Africa and South America. Palestine was chosen for historical and religious reasons, not because it was geographically stable. In retrospect, placing a new state in a region with competing national movements and deep religious significance ensured enduring conflict. To deny that Israel has a unique or metaphysical right to exist is not to deny Jewish dignity, safety, or humanity. It is to assert that no state possesses inherent immunity from moral evaluation. Political legitimacy is derived from conduct, law, and consent. That standard applies universally. Israel, like any other nation, can be supported, opposed, criticized, or defended based on those criteria. The phrase right to exist often functions rhetorically to silence any inquiry. A more precise discussion would ask, is the state just? Are its policies lawful? Are its actions actually defensible? Those are political questions, not theological absolutes. Many Christians believe that Israel has a right to exist while opposing certain policies. Others reject the premise that any modern nation has an inherent divine entitlement to territory. The disagreement should be engaged on legal, historical, and theological grounds, not foreclosed by a cheap slogan.
At the foot of Mount Sinai, a nation met its God in thunder and fire. From that covenant flowed the faith of Abraham, Moses, and the prophets, fulfilled, not replaced, in Christ. But somewhere between the martyrs and the modern West, the truth was blurred. Politicians and pastors began speaking of a Judeo-Christian civilization, a phrase born not of Sinai, but in Washington, tracing its roots not to Moses, but to the Pharisees. The hyphenated heresy challenges the myth of the hyphen, tracing how it reshaped Christian identity, redefined the church's witness, and bound modern faith to political Zionism. Pick up your copy today on Amazon.com.